Reminds me of the sheriff's office in old westerns. You can turn it off. Waste of electricity. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, those of you standing here must sit. You're fine. Oh, you're already standing. Sorry, just kidding. Okay, guys, you can't stand there because you're blocking the view. Guys, you're standing there, you're blocking the view for those behind you. Thank you.
So let's go to the side. Let's go to the side. Go to the side.
It's a very crowded place and there's no way to do it properly. So you need to be considerate and stand aside a little bit. Okay, so where are we now? So this is the city of David. Okay, here is the Temple Mount, Al-Haram al-Sharif in Arabic. The Moriah Mountain in Hebrew, or the Temple Mount. Over here is the Ophel. Okay, and this is the city of David. Okay, we are at the moment around here. Okay, inside the walls. Sorry, right here, and we're going to go underground to here, where the spring of Gihon is. That's right down there. Okay, but let me just remind you the evolution of the city in the past, in the time of the Canaanites in the First Temple period. To do that, we need to get to this reconstruction. Okay, in this reconstruction, we see the city of David, and this is what was called Jerusalem in the time of David and in the time of the Canaanites, not including the Temple Mount, which was not built yet. Okay, that's the first phase, Canaanites and David. In the time of King Solomon, the city expands to the north to build the temple and the Ophel in between the temple and the city of David. Are we fine?
Yes.
That's the second phase in the evolution of Jerusalem. By the 8th century, in the time of Chizkiyahu, or slightly earlier, the city, people build their houses on the western hill, and therefore Chizkiyahu has to build a wall that will go up and protect the people on the western hill. This is what we call the Broad Wall. Okay, we discussed this, we've seen the Broad Wall in the Jewish quarter. So Chizkiyahu city is as big as it gets. 600,000 square meters, it's quite large. It's about 10 times bigger than the Canaanite city used to be. Now, regarding the water, okay, in the Canaanite period, this is the city. So, in the first phase, when the Canaanite needed to protect the water, they had the walls built here. They didn't want to build it down here because this way it will be more vulnerable, easier to attack. So they left the wall up there. But the spring is here. So they decided to build the fortress. This is the fortress, or the Canaanite fortress, that we're going to see. And that fortress sits immediately, this tower, known as the Spring Tower, sits immediately on the spring. Because it sits on the spring, it does not allow water to naturally flow down to the valley. What happens instead? The water goes up. You all understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, it functions like a dam. The water goes up. When it goes up enough, to a height of about 3 meters, 3 meters, that's the most, the water was diverted by the Canaanites from here, from the spring, through the Canaanite channel to the pool of Siloam. It's an irrigation channel. It's an open, here it's open, there are openings. So it is for irrigation, it is for agriculture, for peace times. It cannot serve during times of war. Right? So that was the first stage in the Canaanite period, water's being diverted to here. But this is not protected. So they decided to build an inner pool. Here it is. The blue dot over here, that's the pool. Okay, so some of the water comes, most of the water goes down to the pool here, some of it is gathered here. And that is for times of war, times of siege. In times of siege, the Canaanites would go from here through these parallel walls known as the fortified passage. They would be outside the city, but they're inside the walls, still protected. Stand over here, there's a ramp I added here, draw water, and then back into the city. So that was a safe passage, but what about the pool? The pool also had to be protected, so they added a wall that we have found partially to protect also the pool. So at this stage, in the early stage of the Canaanite period, 1800 BCE, or 3,800 years ago, this is how the system worked, we believe. 1,000 years later, one additional remark, the passage that we see here between the two walls was the earlier phase. At some point, the Canaanites themselves realized that instead of allowing people to come out of the wall directly into the passage, maybe there's a better way. And their solution was to bring people from here, to a point inside the fortifications, by an underground passage. This is the Warren Shaft system. So the Warren Shaft system was used, we believe, already by the Canaanites 3,800 years ago, but just the passage, not the hole, not the shaft. Okay, they did not draw water from the shaft. 1,000 years later, things change. In the time of the first temple, things begin to change, and the people of Jerusalem decide, maybe in the time of Chizkiyahu, maybe slightly earlier, not to rely on these fortifications. Instead, they take the passage, the Canaanite passage, and begin to lower it down, lower its floor, in hope, I guess, that's my interpretation, not the excavators, in hope to get directly to the aquifer. Why do I think that was their aim? Because that's exactly what you're going to see when you go to Chatzor, roughly from the same time. In Chatzor, they built a water system, which is basically a tunnel dug into the bedrock, reaching the water table. So I think this is what they wanted to do in the Canaanite period, lowering the floor, but not in the Canaanite, in the first temple period, lowering the floor in the first temple period. But in doing so, while they were lowering the floor, they encountered something unexpected, and that was the vertical shaft, which is natural. So they decided to stop the lowering of the floor, and then they started drawing water from that shaft, okay, directly from the spring, without lowering the entire floor, just having a nice point where you can draw water and you're safe all over. So the entire system here is no longer functioning. You don't need the spring tower, you don't need the passage, you don't need the Canaanite pool. You have a direct access to the spring. That happens in the 8th century. As I will tell you later, this system actually worked, and it can work. Okay, what I'm saying is opposed to what the excavators, Reich and Shukrun, say. They are wrong. Okay, I'll show you why. So the system can be used, and it was used. Okay, we'll get to that. That was the second phase.
I have a question.
Okay, just one second. That was the second phase out of 3. The third phase is a couple of years after the second. In the time of Chizkiyahu, when Chizkiyahu prepares his city to the siege of the Assyrians are going to besiege Jerusalem in 701. Chizkiyahu prepares his city for the siege, and he does 2 main things. Firstly, he builds a wall starting perhaps here, somewhere here, surrounding the pool of Siloam, putting it for the first time in history inside the city, then climbing up on the hill and protecting the western hill. That was one thing he did. The second thing he did is taking care of the passage of the water from the spring to the pool. The spring is protected. The pool is now protected by the broad wall. The only problem was that the passage was unsecure. It was unsafe. So instead of using it, he decided to dig another tunnel starting here, just like the Canaanite channel. He begins his tunnel in the spring tower, in the spring itself, under the hill, and then water comes to the pool, the same direction, the same outlet, but in a different, better protected route. From that point on, people no longer need to go to the spring. The spring takes its water to the pool, and now the pool is protected, so they can draw water from directly here.
So they shut off the spring, access to the spring at that point?
That is true, and that's exactly what the book of Chronicles, second book of Chronicles, chapter 32 says, that they blocked the access to the water. So that's exactly what the Bible says, and that's exactly what this reconstruction suggests. Yes.
Two questions, if I may. One, why did they?
Always two. Why?
I know, sorry. Why did they have to block the access to this? Why did they have to block the access to the spring?
The spring always had an access, even though there was a tower on top.
Yeah.
There must have been an entrance, because during times, peaceful times, you don't want people to go underground in the dark passage we're going to walk. Now it's very convenient. Think about 3,000 years ago. So instead of that, there must have been an entrance, an access through the tower. That was probably what was blocked. And perhaps the entire tower was blocked by putting tons of earth on it, covering it. Who knows?
If I understood correctly, when we went to visit Gezer, we learned that the spring was not within the wall, it was outside the wall. And that all of the cities, the spring is outside the wall.
Yes.
Is Jerusalem different? Jerusalem is they moved it inside the wall for protection?
They built this to protect the spring.
Okay. So Jerusalem is
Is
different,
protected.
is protected as opposed to
Yes.
the other places that
Is
didn't
not.
need to be protected?
But in Gezer, there's no outlet. That's why they had no concern about that. They just simply went down to the spring. There wasn't too much water there to begin with, so there was no problem. It wouldn't break the blockage. And they would simply draw water from the spring in Gezer. Even though the spring is located outside the walls, the enemy did not have access to the spring. Here, it's different.
Why didn't the enemy have access to the spring if it was outside the walls?
They didn't, because the entrance from the outside was blocked. So they drew the water from within the city. The enemy did not have access from the outside. Here, you draw the water from the Gihon, but the Gihon is extremely powerful. It gives you about 600,000 cubic meters per annum, so it's huge amount of water. You can't get rid of it. You can't just draw it and hope that the enemy wouldn't even know about that. In Gezer, it's a tiny spring. Okay, more than last, yes, I see.
I also have two questions.
Yes, go ahead.
The first one, during the second and the third phase, was there any water in the pool, this one? Or did it close the passage from here?
The second phase meant that they're now using the Gihon spring directly. So the water system here, the Canaanite pool, was no longer in use, and they actually built a neighborhood inside. These are the houses that were built inside what used to be the pool.
Oh, okay.
We're going to see that in a moment. Yes.
So just to clarify, I only have one question. The channel number 2, the Canaanite channel, is
Yeah.
that's on the inside of the wall or on the outside?
No, it was outside the walls. It was outside the walls. However, in the time of Uzziyahu, we believe, following the new finds, a wall in the first temple period was built to protect the entrances. But we believe that Hizkiyahu deemed it insufficient, because if they hear about the existence of the entrances, they could destroy just a piece of the wall and infiltrate into the city. So that was not a good solution, and therefore he decided to replace it totally with another fortification, with another water system.